Film Award Cologne honors British director Steve McQueen. Steve McQueen first came to fame as a video artist. In 1999, he was awarded the prestigious Turner Prize for his work Deadpan, where he created a scene from a Buster-Keaton movie. In 2009, he represented the United Kingdom at the Venice Biennale. His feature film debut, Hunger, from 2008, a haunting depiction of a hunger strike among IRA members in the Northern Irish Mace prison, won the Golden Kamera in Cannes right away. His slavery drama, 12 Years a Slave, is the first film by a black director to have ever won the Best Picture category of the Academy Awards. And with the celebrated miniseries Small Axe and Uprising, he's now setting new standards for quality TV. Please welcome award-winning director Steve McQueen. Steve, the Film Award Cologne is given to personalities who have made an outstanding contribution to the further development of the language of film and media through their work. Looking at your work, it becomes clear that you are a polyglot artist, fluent in several film languages or modes of visual expression. So let's start with your video art as a first entry into your media multilingualism. I think there's a lot about it that immediately blows you away, something that hits you immediately, directly affects you, so to speak, because it's very focused on the visual. I'm thinking of your work of the 1990s, like Bear or Deadpan, both silent and thus clearly oriented towards the shaping of an optical language. It seems to me that video art and video installations open up a wide experimental space, perhaps similar to the beginning of film history when cinematic expression was not so fixed on narrative formulas or dialogue-driven storytelling. So how did you find your way into this kind of experimental space, and what specific modes of expression did you form there?
Wow. Wow. Yeah. It was more. It was to do with it was about being curious, inquisitive, and wanting to find out myself. I think when I was at art school, again, when you're a kid, you play around with a crayon, and then from a crayon I got a paintbrush, and I was very lucky enough to end up with a camera, a Super 8 camera at art school. And looking through the lens and moving the camera, it was like world-changing for me. There's one thing about being an audience member and being passive, watching something. There's another thing about being active, shooting something, looking at inside a frame and moving it around. So that was just, it just perked my curiosity, because I was a painter at that point. I was at art school, I was painting, and the fact that one could move the frame, one could create a sort of structure through that process was sort of, it was exciting. It was immediate, with painting. I think I was much more of a social person, as a worker, as a person who sort of, I like to work, but at the same time, I like to work with a crew. Similar when I was playing football, I love the team. I love us to do well, to motivate, to corral. And I think me in a studio with turpentine and oil paint, with a dirty rag and fucking paintbrushes, that wasn't my life. And also being confronted with this fucking canvas every day on my own. And yeah, it was exciting. Don't get me wrong, but I somehow. The collective I was interested in and to motivate. And also because you could find out through conversations, no, not find out, you can actually create something, an atmosphere which could develop on film. So that's what I was interested in. And as far as art is concerned, I'll shut up in a second. It was just the fact that finding out myself for the first time, not looking at history books, not looking at film, but finding out myself was very exciting.
Okay, I see, thank you. I think one can also detect in your early work, in your video work, a certain procedure of moving in time and space, from which emerges a kind of specific relationship to history. An example would be Carib Sleep, Western Deep, an immersive cinematic installation made from footage you filmed in Grenada, the Caribbean, and in South Africa. It's premiered here in Germany at the Documenta in Kassel, 2002. I think this work is strongly informed by the structure of repetition in such a way that one never quite knows whether one is witnessing an endless loop or a never-ending series. So I think the repetition, the loop, forms the ground for paths that lead from the here and now to the deep layers of history, like an artistic archaeology, maybe. Something that has to be uncovered, something that we haven't yet set our eyes on. Can you tell us a bit about this project and its arrangement? What was your approach to this kind of complex form of history visualization?
Well, it was more about ritual than looping. I think, when you wake up in the morning, you wipe the sleep out your eyes, you stare at the ceiling for a minute, you throw the covers off, you get out of bed, you go to the mirror in the bathroom, look at yourself, you look at your teeth, you pick up the toothbrush. Rituals, it's almost like dance. It's almost like a wonderful, beautiful choreography. And with Western Deep, the seed of the project was about descent. And I was very much interested in the whole idea of descending. And then I was doing some research and I found that the deepest elevators in the world are in this place called, in South Africa, just outside of Cape Town. And the mine was called Western Deep. And it was like 3.5 kilometers underground. And you don't have the elevator going straight down. You have to sort of stagnate it, otherwise it'll collapse. And you go down, and there's a train, and you go down, there's a train. And at any one point, there'd be 5,000 men underground at the face of this gold mine. And I just thought, interesting, the whole idea of economy and minerals and wealth. I mean, the fact of the matter is, gold is not rare; it's just difficult to get. And that's what makes the economy of gold. So I was just very fascinated with that, and I did as much reading as I could. But when I got there, I didn't imagine I would see what I saw. I mean, one of the scenes in the film, in the artwork, is of these guys. Every day there are people tested to see if they can withstand the heat, and also their durability in the heat. So there's a situation where there's rooms where I think it's about like 8 slabs of concrete going up the whole width of this long corridor space. And there are men who are doing steps in time and they've got these blue shorts on, and they have to step in time with this flashing red light going beep, beep, beep. And it's like Busby Berkeley slashed with some sort of horrific sort of, what you could think of as some sort of slave image. It was shocking, but this was sort of the norm to see if people could withstand. And these guys were not from South Africa; they were from neighboring African countries, and that test was a test if they could survive or not, and also a test of their life if they could actually go on. Because if they didn't pass the test, well, that was it. That was the end of their employment in that mine. And it was horrific, but at the same time, it was just odd. Ritual.
Yeah. And also like a punch in the gut, I think, which is good, because that what art is supposed to do, right?
Yeah, a lot of the time. I remember when I showed it in Documenta for the first time, people said, "Oh, well, did you make that up? Was that?" I said, no, this is real. But you know what's interesting about that? It was not shocking for anyone at all. At the end of the day, I thought, okay, this is going to make a lot of people think, and how can I say, act or discuss. Nothing of the sort.
It wasn't?
No.
How come?
I think because we're all numb, aren't we? I mean, even if it's something which is, is numb to it. But we could talk about other things which maybe make us unnumb later, like George Floyd. But that's another question. It's another thing, completely different. Let's talk.
Okay. Okay. So just to wrap up the your video work, what is the situation of this kind of art form today? Do you think video art is migrating to other spaces, like video platforms or website or something like that? Or is the closed space of the gallery or the museum the predestined place for an art form that I think demands a certain kind of contemplation, kind of immersion, without distraction or click requirements?
Look, in the way you segregated also the questioning as art first and then feature film second, I don't, mingle. I don't, it's not for me. I don't segregate that. It's just, using, again, I've always said this, it's like writing poetry or writing a novel, using the same tools to do the same thing. The poetry is concise, is fractured, is compressed, and obviously the novel is the yarn. It's just doing the same things, but doing it differently. That's all. So I would never segregate the two. I don't have that in my head. And as far as spaces are concerned, wherever there's an audience. I mean, I think there's this space for. It's how you want the film or the artwork to be perceived, where you want it to be perceived, and it doesn't matter. I mean, art. The amazing thing about art is ridiculous. The only thing that's keeping you is gravity. Anything's up for grabs in art. Anything's up for grabs. The only thing you have to defy in some ways, you don't have to defy it. You have to sort of incorporate it. Is gravity. That's why it's just so damn hard to make anything interesting. Because everything's up for grabs. It's the most hardest thing you could possibly think of doing. Absolutely. And have some kind of and form of a reach, meaning that you can connect, you can communicate. Yeah.
Yeah, but still, I think when you did your first feature film, Hunger, people involved in the project must have been kind of astonished, or working with somebody coming from a video art background, because you obviously were not holding the classic rule book of narrative feature film in your hands, but were integrating different ideas of visual storytelling. I don't think Hunger looks like a classic feature film. It doesn't have the conventional form of telling a story or developing a narrative, right?
I don't know. I didn't care. I didn't know. That wasn't in my mind. I just wanted to sort of, again, I didn't, I don't know. That's not in my head. Of course, I've seen lots of films when I was obviously growing up, and the history of film to a certain extent is in one's head. But what I cared about most was the story of Bobby Sands and Hungerstrike. Everything else was secondary. How do I facilitate that story, that narrative, that man, what he did and what others did, and that space of the H blocks, the H block prison in Northern Ireland. Film wasn't you know what? Film for me is like a butterfly net and a magnifying fine glass. It's all about what can facilitate the story. I couldn't care less about film in that sense, as long as I could use it, the tools, to sort of use the tools for what the narrative wants to be. That's it, not the other way around.
Yeah, but still, I think when we think of a feature film, we think of most often of stories that are told in pictures. But in your work, it seems to be the other way around. So there are the images, and then the story emerges from them.
No. No, it's all about, it's all about the story. I mean, I can't, it's not vanities. I don't have a template and put it onto the narrative. That's impossible. For me to get the image, you have to get the story. It's impossible to do it any otherwise. I can't be inspired by a frame. I can be inspired by what's in the frame,
Was it different to work in Hollywood than in Europe? So obviously we have the kind of classical demarcation line between European artist cinema and then Hollywood mainstream film. And I imagine it must have been a different way of working in Hollywood than in Europe?
No. 12 Years a Slave, that was the first one. Shame and Hunger were European films. I mean, I wanted to shoot Shame in the UK, but because at the time, it was quite funny because the Tiger Woods story had just broken. And also, we had these newspapers, particularly the News of the World, which was bugging people. So the whole idea of people knocking on someone's door saying, I want to talk to sex addicts, I mean, the journalists were not seen as nice people at that point, and people thought we were journalists, but at the same time I thought, oh, the city that never sleeps, New York, that would be the best place for a sex addict. So that was it, so that was easy. And it was a European film, so, in that sense of the financing and so forth. 12 Years a Slave, no, I didn't have to do anything differently. I fought certain things I had to fight, I fought and won, but because, I don't know why, but no, I didn't compromise on anything. I mean, there was a few things that there were fights about, but I won. But that's just that was it.
What was the hardest fight?
The ending, because at the end there was a situation where I spoke about Solomon, in the text. There were two things. There was Patsy's. One of the main thing was the ending where. We talked about Solomon and what happened to him in the end, how he basically became a sort of involved in the abolitionist movement, and that he disappeared, and no one knows what happened to him in the end. And the studio said, well, do we have to put that we don't know where he is, and that no one knows, he came to seem like a very sad demise at the end. And I said, well, it's like Anne Frank story, everyone knows Anne Frank did not survive. So it's a story which is kind of similar in a way, and I basically won the argument. That was it, and they were convinced after that. After I gave that comparison, that was it. There were some other things because I think people were in America. There was a confrontation with slavery, and I think this film, 12 years changed a lot. Obviously, in American cinema, we changed a lot with that picture. And the movies that were made afterwards, there's certain movies that would not have been made after 12 years, and and also so why and all these kind of things happened after that. And I think the reason why that movie was made, a lot of it was because of President Obama at the time. I think if he wasn't president, it would have been difficult to make that film. I think there was a kind of I think in some ways it's like a favor. And then when it made a lot of money, when it became a blockbuster, people think, oh my God, there's money in this. Let's make some more of this shit. So that was it.
Okay. I think you're absolutely right that this movie enabled other movies to develop. And so I would like to talk about your television projects as well, because I think it's a similar way of opening up doors for other stories to be told. For Small Axe and Uprising, you work with the BBC. Both of these projects are serialized, but in the same time they diverge from classic series formats. So Small Axe is not a conventional television series, but more of an anthology of 5 film parts that are loosely connected. How did you develop Small Axe?
Well, Small Axe started a long time, but maybe about 10 years ago or more. About 10 years ago, maybe 10 years ago or more. I just wanted these stories to be sort of seen and heard. These are stories which are, again, about the West Indian community, the black community in London from '68 till now. And I thought at first I would make it a story about one family and moving through this period of time, but what was so interesting about that was the research that we did. And within the research that we did, there was some amazing stories that I thought I can't, you know, sort of fictionalize this situation. I have to sort of, you know, bring these stories into the fore and to make these stories into the series. And that was it. That's what I wanted to do. And I remember some of the BBC said, "Well, how are people going to come back every week then?" I said, "Well, we're going to make each an individual story as brilliantly as possible." That was it. So they're connected, but they're not a sort of continuing narrative, traditional thing with obviously these series to do. And then I thought cheekily, you know what? I'm going to make 5 feature films. Why not? And that's what we did. Yeah.
And people came back to watch them.
Thank God. Yeah.
Uprising is a project that is strongly informed by a documentary approach. So to me, it looks like looking for the details, and also there's a special place given to contemporary witnesses. So is that kind of oral history with the means of television, or does it mean to make these voices audible, to bring the faces of survivors closer to us, and thus maybe even make history experienceable in a different way?
Absolutely. Listen, it's interesting that these events in Uprising, the New Crossfire, happened 40 years ago. But most people, just like Hunger, when I made Hunger, hardly any young people that knew about these men who died in a British prison cell through starvation. You know, that's what happened. The only time it's ever happened. Similar to that, the New Cross fire, where these 13 children that died, the worst tragedy in a fire in UK history, died in a house fire, in a party. And the fact that no one really knew about that, and other events that happened after the fact, the Black People's Day of Action, you know, the police and their sort of dealings with the community. It was incredible. So I'm sorry, just going back to your question, which I've half forgot about. So I just got into it.
Yeah, go on.
But it was very important. Yes, it was very important. We had these oral histories, that we had the interviewees, because you must imagine. You know, at first when we approached them, the people were very skittish and very skeptical, very nervous, very frightened, very, suspicious. And then when we got their trust, well, that's when they could talk. And the emotion and the articulation and the intelligence were all there for us to sort of witness. I imagine building up for 40 years. And I think this was important for them. So for us, for me, it was facilitating them. You know, sometimes as a filmmaker, all you have to do is get the confidence of someone and facilitate them. And a lot of my work was to do with the archive and the editing and the structure.
And I think still it's all about details, and even details of the faces, the blink of an eye, the smallest movements within the faces, right?
Well, yeah, but also the details within story. Again, yes, facial expressions, but it's all about, again, this word is being thrown around like confetti right now, but the joy, the fun of going to a party for the first time and being excited and being in love. And there were so many. I mean, I went to these were called blues parties. Basically, these children died. Blues parties were these parties that people used to clear out their front room. West Indian people, Black people, even since the 50s, people used to clear out their front room and turn it into a certain kind of like a discotheque as such. They would serve food, they would serve drink, because a lot of the time Black people were barred from clubs, or there was a quota. So people said, fuck that, we'll make our own clubs. So that's what happened. Since my mother was going in the 50s, 60s, 70s, people and they were called blues. They were called blues parties. So usually what happened was they would take off the light and put a blue light on, and it'd be dark, dark, dark. And it was very sexy. It was people dancing, obviously the music, the bass. In the 70s, a lot of reggae, and the walls would be sweating, literally sweating. And it was cool, man. It was just really, it was cool. But this particular party, unfortunately, there was a fire.
Is there something of a kind of pre-story in small acts? I'm thinking of Lovers Rock, which is all about this kind of party, and the groove and the sound, and you instantly feel it. And when I was watching it, I was like moving a bit to that beautiful music, and also the fun and just the little things that can happen when you have a party at night. Did you have Uprising in your head when you were developing Small Axe?
No.
No.
Because 99.9% of those parties were amazing. I would say 98% of those parties were amazing, because sometimes the police would come and mash them up or break them down and so forth. But majority of those parties went smoothly. Unfortunately, this particular party, things obviously, but you can see the comparison. Definitely, you can see the link. Absolutely, of what would have happened, and what were in people's minds that night, and how it could have ended up being, but what unfortunately it did end up being. Yes.
You have this little moment when the girl walks outside, and there are these kind of 3 or 4 white guys. So you get the feeling of, okay, something could go wrong, but she turns around and everything is fine.
Yeah, I mean, look, again, with that, again, that was the, again, you saw also the police and stuff when the cousin comes in and stuff. And again, that capsule, don't get me, on a Saturday night, the blues parties were released for people. It was about, black people being with each other, forgetting the week of humiliation at work and whatever happened to you at that time, and just being together, feeling them completely themselves. And also within that capsulation, you can't keep up all the shit, can you? So you do get, the leakage of dicks being dicks, and guys trying to sort of take advantage of women. Sometimes you do get that. So that had to be portrayed in the film, and at the same time eliminated. But it is what it is. It is humans sort of having a good time.
Okay, coming back to Uprising, there is a moment in this series when somebody says Black lives didn't matter at that point of time. And you also mentioned George Floyd. So can you tell us a bit about the link to the Black Lives Matter movement? Did you have something of that in your head when you were developing Uprising?
No.
How does it connect?
We didn't start, no, because unfortunately these things happen. I mean, George Floyd, I remember when I first heard about George Floyd, I was like, I'm out. I'm not even, I didn't engage. I thought, yeah, and then that guy dying. In myself, I thought, I switched off. I was like, no, I'm not dealing with that. I'm not going to deal with that. Because it was another incident, again, another one, so, I thought, okay. And I think what it also was all about my sanity, to be honest with you. I think, with black people, at a certain point, there's a situation of, surviving and thriving. Sometimes I just shut it down. It's like, okay, I'm not dealing with that. And then there was a friend of mine, I was with a friend of mine, our sons are friends, and we were talking, and I was actually talking about it with him, because obviously after that moment, things got more and more visible and more in the media and more spoken about, because it wasn't always a situation where it happened, it went away, which happened most of the time, possibly because of that amazing woman who kept her camera on that man, on George, God bless his soul. So I was questioning myself more. Oh, this is what I do to survive. This is what I do to sort of keep my sanity. So when things came to, again, it's interesting, isn't it? When this gentleman, we have to have this pandemic, okay? All around the world, it's everywhere. People shutting down. We have to have this man who is murdered in the most torturous manner for 9.5 minutes. For people to think, you know what? There might be something in this race thing, There might be something in this racism thing. So it has to be, black people deal with extremes every fucking day. So yet again, another extreme. So it has to be extreme for people to think, you know what? Let's demonstrate, let's do something about this. So it has to be so unfortunate. The world has shut down and this man has to be murdered for 9.5 minutes with someone's knee on his neck for people to pay a fucking attention. You see what I mean? So So I don't know. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, it is about cameras. I mean, think of Rodney King. As you said, somebody has to have a camera.
Well, nothing happened there, did it?
LA was burning.
Sorry?
LA was burning. Something happened after that.
Yeah, it happened. It went, 2 steps forwards and 5 steps backwards. I mean, this is another case. This is another case in point. The George Floyd thing is another case in point. Not everyone, but everywhere around the world there was demonstrations, which was incredible. It was absolutely incredible. So that's like new. That's something new. And I think because of the pandemic as well, everyone was watching television. Everyone was attentive to themselves. Excuse me. It took that extreme for people to think, you know what, maybe there's something about this race thing. So it's heavy shit.
Yeah, and it's about images, right? I think you just have to see it in images.
I don't think there's anything as superficial as that. No. I think I've never seen the George Floyd film. I've never seen it.
I've seen it.
Well, you have. Yeah, there you go. It's not about that. It's about consciousness. I mean, if I tell you what happened, you have to see what happened to believe me? No. I mean, if I told you someone did something to me, but maybe, I don't know, maybe there's a lot of people who need to wake up,
There's one thing I would like to ask you about Widows, a film that I deeply admire. Yeah, I do. And I think it's a kind of hinge between feature films and series. It's based on a British mini-series from the 80s, and it tells the story of 4 women who, as widows, take on their unfinished job after the deaths of their husbands. And the film initially looks like a classic heist movie. So the genre scaffolding is there, it's the basic structure, but then you also keep adding some kind of new rugs, so that we have to climb the scaffold differently. And this includes, above all, the fact that we are dealing here with the dominance of female characters, with their perspectives, with their ways of looking, and their ways of acting. So I would like to know what particularly interested you in this project. Is it the redirection of expectations, or what does it mean when a film is no longer only about fighting men, but about the bodies that remain after their deaths, and also and especially female bodies?
It wasn't about, what was interesting to me was, what can I say, these women. When I was young, watching TV, and I saw these 4 women, what was so interesting for me was, in some ways, I could identify with them. I mean, when those came out, my goodness gracious, was it 1980? I was 10 years old. And somehow I could identify with them, Here was a situation where people didn't think that these people were capable of doing what they ended up doing, And maybe me as a black boy at that point in UK, having the sort of, having low expectations put on me by schools, and seeing these women who were, working class, white, black, sort of achieving their unobtainable mission was kind of interesting. And also they were very familiar. They were working class people. One of them was a sort of kind of aspirational Thatcherite person who was the lead. But it was interesting because it talked about the social demographic, their environment. It talked about sexuality. It talked about, obviously at that point, seeing how then the 80s, it's very different. But not much has moved on, to be honest with you, as far as that sort of those kind of images are concerned. So that's the thing that fascinated me at first, and wanting to sort of get to know these women or recast these women differently, and especially in Chicago, where I first went. Actually, my first museum show was in Chicago. It was the Institution of Contemporary Art Chicago, and I went there with my then girlfriend, now wife, and she was covering the Democratic convention at that point. I think it was Clinton. So it was a little while back. So I was in my first sort of meeting of Chicago was sort of art and politics, and that's what I wanted Widows to be, because I add this extra layer of local politics into the mix, because I was just fascinated with how things actually work and how things work, and how criminality in some ways is sort of, be it political or so-called criminal, is looked at. And that was all. You know, Robin Hood, that's what it was. Yeah.
Thank you. Could you also tell us something about your future projects? What are you working on right now?
No. A few things. Something's coming out this week in the press, I think, or next week maybe. But yeah, a couple of things I'm interested in doing. But again, I think, you know, I think if any young filmmakers out there or producers, or not young necessarily, it's just, I think it's about, you know, exploring, isn't it? It's about not necessarily knowing where you're going to end up. And I'm not neat. I don't want to be neat and tidy. I'm not interested in, you know, it's not perfect, and neither I don't even know what perfect is. It's about being human, whatever it is. And I think, you know, finding things, exploring, and not being afraid of things. Because I suppose once you're afraid of something, they become bigger than you. And sometimes to point the camera at something in order to sort of conquer it is very, very important. In order to sort of confront it is very important. In order to sort of point fingers and allow people to see certain things, in order to sort of be very direct and confrontational and bring people to account in one way, shape, form or the other. You know, that's what I'm interested in.
Thank you so much, Steve, for the insights and perspectives on your work. I think the unifying factor of your work is not just an obsession with injustice, racial, colonial, political...
And sex, don't forget.
Yeah, okay, I'd include that. Social, sexual, economic, but also the history of resistance to it.
You've got to add the spice. Nothing's good without spice. My God, the food here, Jesus, what happened? There's some seasoning in this shit.
So let's grab some. Oh, there was another clapping. Go on. Applaud if you want.
Yeah.
But what I wanted to add is that I think that your works makes a particular contribution to that, shifting the field of vision, disrupting, irritating, unsettling established narratives, to enable and assert new ways of looking. Can you go along with that?
No, I don't want to be irritating or disturbing. That's not I'm not interested in, you know, it's not, I mean, even punk rock, you know, that was a movement. People, they're scary, oh my God. I just feel that people, when you want to tell the truth, people are upset about it, you know, because they're so used to being brainwashed with shit. You know, so, you know, when all of a sudden they hear a new sound, if it's music, and it's like, oh, what's this? Oh, it's this scary business. If it's punk, or if it's sort of hip hop, or if it's house, or whatever, you know, it doesn't go, it's not what they were brought up on. It's always something new. It's always something, you know, it's like, you know, in the 50s, it's rock and roll. Oh my God, what is this stuff? Or, you know, in film, if we're not doing that as filmmakers, then we're not doing our job, because it has to be a progression of sound and image and narrative. I mean, there's no right way of making a feature film. There's no right way. The only right way is that people stay on their asses. Bums on, that's the only right way. People stay on their bums looking at, then you can tick that box. There's no right way of making a film. Even then, that's not necessarily a right way, because, you know, there's some junk on the big screen that people sit down and eat their fucking popcorn and sodas. But there's not a right way of doing it. I think it's not about disrupting, it's about finding, and not being bothered with the whole idea of you being sort of disturbing, but just bothered about, you know, trying to find it, whatever it is. You know, it's very exciting when you think about it. And I think, unfortunately, that's what, with streaming and with all this stuff, there's a certain kind of nullifying, there's a certain kind of numbness which has happened. You know, because people have to feed the beast. And, you know, you look at TV now compared to say 15, 20 years ago, it's terrible. It is terrible. It's not, you know, you think of The Wire, you think of Sopranos, you think of 6 Feet Under, et cetera, a lot of things you could tell me about, I've forgotten about. It's not, oh my God, do you remember seeing Twin, I mean, I was old enough seen Twin Peaks for the first time on television? What
Absolutely.
was that? It was like, and the people, and it was this like, what is this? And then people came back to see it, and it was on. It was on terrestrial TV. It was CBS, CBS, I think, or NBC. It was on normal television. I mean, wow! And people wanted to watch it. So again, you know, and that was hugely popular, wasn't it? At the time, it was out there. So these are the things I'm interested in: that people finding things. There's no right or wrong way of doing it. There just isn't. So anyone tells you that, nonsense.
Then this might also be about digging, and often digging in the dirt. So you have to go deeper to find the deeper layers of a way to tell a story, right?
I don't know. I recently have gone back to the past. It was heavy. Because when you go back to the past, I mean, excavating, so Small Axe and Uprising is about, you know, it's a particular time. It's that new wave time. It's that like 79, 80, 81 period. And I suppose that's when I came as a young person. In fact, I would say no. I would say as a black boy, as a black child, you become more conscious at a very early age. You ask yourself who, how, why, and what at a very early age. So you're more conscious. And I think that at that moment, when I was growing up, I was like 10, 11 years old, 9, 10, 11, things just became much more sort of poignant. You know, we were going in from Labour government, socialist government, into a conservative one, which is that. This is when things just started to tip over. This was a precipice, and I was there when, you know, things tipped over, and it marked me. And I'm a Thatcher baby. You know, I am a Thatcher baby. So no matter whatever people might think, or I think, I came from an age where it's like Norman Tebbit. He was deputy prime minister. At the time, to get on your bike, do it yourself. I had no other reason. I had to, because no one was giving me anything. And it wasn't because I supported that regime, it's because it was a must. So you say digging and excavating. It was very hard to go back to the past, because you're confronted with certain things. I imagine if you go back to your past and you think of, and it's very different seeing your parents, looking at your parents when you're a teenager compared to looking at them now as a middle-aged man. So I had to go through that. There's a lot of uncomfortable, interesting things and things which were resolved through me going back. But then I've done that. So now I could just move on. So for me, you know, again, that was, you know, and I don't call it's not nostalgic. It's actually answering questions for now. So people seeing these stories, a lot of them seen for the first time, but also asking ourselves, how far have we come and how far do we need to go? So I'm over here now. In my looking at cinema or film or whatever, you know, I've done it. Thank God. It wasn't homework, but at the same time, it was. I had to deal with it in order for me to go forward, you know.
And we are so much looking forward to seeing you moving forward. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming.